But yeah, I mean, the other one is Ferrari. We've got to talk about them, right, Katie? Because week after week, they are letting their fans down, aren't they?
I think that is an understatement. And it's interesting after what was a really horrible qualifying for Charles Leclerc in Barcelona. He came off, did a couple interviews, and he said, certainly something's wrong with the car. It just didn't feel right. Well, Ferrari were unable to find any physical breakdowns or issues that resulted in Leclerc's issues in qualifying in Spain. What does that mean? Was it a setup issue? Was that all on Charles Leclerc and his lack of performance? How would you quantify it?
Yeah, that's a really tough one, because the weird thing was it was different from Saturday to Sunday as well. So on Saturday, he had one specific problem with the car. I think it was in left-hand corners, I think I'm right in saying. And then on Sunday, it was a completely different issue, and it was more kind of what you'd expect from the car, but just it wasn't performing very well. And they did remove the gearbox rear suspension, basically put a whole new rear end on that car. And it seemed to solve a little bit of the first problem, but it also didn't lead to a massive step forward. That car had a whole bunch of updates on it. And as we saw in qualifying, Carlos Sainz made pretty good use of those upgrades. But, sometimes when you do make changes to a car, it can either move it away from what a certain driver wants, or it can expose other issues. Even if the performance overall improves, it might not improve the drivability of the car. And that's the one thing that the Ferrari seems to really lack this year, is the pure drivability. We've seen in certain circumstances, I'm basically thinking of Azerbaijan qualifying, it is the fastest car, which is incredible when you think where Red Bull have been for this whole season. But Leclerc, in the 2 qualifying sessions we had in Baku, because we had a sprint race and a normal race, he was ahead. Now that really kind of shows you the potential. This frustrating thing with Ferrari is that they just cannot get that potential at every race, at every type of circuit. It seems like certain types of corners, 90-degree corners, car's pretty good, right angle corners. But as soon as it gets to these longer sweeping corners, or even some of the slower stuff, it's really hard for the drivers to predict what's happening, and the performance just isn't there. So, another test in Montreal. I've given up predicting where Ferrari are going to be. I remember earlier podcasts, you or Nate would say, "Hey, how's the Ferrari going to go?" And I'd say with some confidence of, "Oh, it'll be a good track. It will be a bad track." I now have no idea. I'm not even going to pretend. And with the updates they brought in Spain, that's the other thing. It can change the characteristics of where a car is quick. And Ferrari may have a slightly better car overall, but if it's really weak at certain tracks, then that's still going to be pretty frustrating for the drivers. So, yeah, I don't know where we go with that. There is a good news story about Ferrari, though.
Please.
Or not. Completely unrelated to Formula One, but they won the Le Mans 24 Hours, which,
Yes.
Katie, do you watch a Le Mans 24 Hours? I mean, it's definitely not for everyone. 24 hours of racing. I didn't watch 24 Hours of Racing either, but I did watch bits of it, and Ferrari's performance there was pretty impressive. There's some reasons behind the scenes to do with how they kind of stop certain teams from getting too far ahead. So it would be like in F1 with Red Bull, they'd add an extra few kilos to their car. They did that to Toyota. But yeah, aside from that, Ferrari did a remarkable job. And so Leclerc was there, Fred Vasseur was there, and also the president, John Elkann, was there. And they all saw a Ferrari victory for the first time this year in a kind of top tier motorsport. And so I think that's a little bit of extra pressure on Ferrari. The Le Mans team can go and win.
No doubt.
He has to step up, right?
When you were around Charles in Spain, I mean, he's had some bad luck this year. I would not say that this is the start he envisioned or wanted whatsoever. What would you say his mental space is in right now?
I think he is quite low. And he's actually very good at defending the team and putting a lot of the pressure back on himself and admitting to his own mistakes and being analytical of his own mistakes, being open about his own mistakes. But now you can see more and more that it's not his mistakes. And if they are his mistakes, it's because the car's put him in such a horrible position. And you can see the frustration bubbling up. I don't think it always quite comes across in the quotes. I think he's still quite good at just limiting himself to what he's saying, but the body language is pretty negative. And I think it's just because, he went into last year. This time last year, even, he was still a championship contender.
Yeah.
We had our doubts by this point last year, but he was still right up there with a chance to win the title. And really, from roughly this point onwards, it all went wrong, and it's brought about a year of domination by Max Verstappen and Red Bull. And Leclerc will know from those early races of 2022. Remember, we had a number where him and Max were fighting wheel to wheel, and we thought, this is great. This, it's a shame that we don't have more drivers involved. It's a shame we don't have Lewis and George. But wouldn't it be great if we now see Max versus Charles Leclerc at the top of F1? And I think he really expected that to happen, and all of that has been whipped away through no fault of Leclerc's own. I mean, I know he made some mistakes last year, but ultimately the downward trend has been in car performance, not in driver performance. So yeah, I think it's tough for him. Also because what do you do? Like any other driver on the grid right now, how do you compete with Max Verstappen if you're not in a Red Bull? Because none of the other cars are quick enough.
You can't, sadly. And I can't imagine trying to mentally deal with that. It's going to take a really strong mindset, I think, for Charles Leclerc to kind of pull himself out of what would be called a funk right now, certainly. And as you mentioned, it's not all on him. It's certainly some of the onus has to be put on the team and the car that they're putting on track.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.